Straight nights of American airstrikes on Iran. Then, on a Friday night, they just stop. No press conference. No victory speech. Just silence. If that silence sounds like good news to you, stay with me. Because inside the White House, the reason it stopped might be scarier than the bombing itself, and almost nobody scrolling past today's headlines actually understands why. Before we get into it, hit like, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications, because this story is still moving fast, and I'll be tracking every twist as it happens. Section 1. What just happened? For almost 2 weeks, U.S. forces struck Iranian targets night after night. 13 consecutive nights, a pace most modern wars never sustained for that long. Then, without warning, the strikes paused. A Defense Department source described it in 3 words: on hold. Not ended, not concluded, not canceled, on hold. Sit with that phrase for a second, because it's doing a lot of work. A hold isn't peace. A hold is a pause with an invisible clock attached to it, and outside a small circle of officials, nobody knows exactly how long that clock is set to run. Section 2. How we got here. None of this happened overnight. Go back to last summer when Israel and Iran fought a brutal 12-day war that pulled outside powers in almost immediately. It ended with something unprecedented: a direct American strike on Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities. The first time in history a U.S. president had ordered a strike on another nation's nuclear program. A ceasefire followed, along with a memorandum of understanding giving both sides a 60-day window to turn a fragile pause into something lasting. That window didn't hold. Planned talks in Switzerland were called off before they even started, and trust between Washington and Tehran, already thin, kept eroding. By spring, strikes on Iran's nuclear sites resumed. Iranian state media confirmed the Natanz enrichment site was hit again in March. Through the following months, both sides kept testing each other, and by mid-July, the slow escalation had turned into something that looked like open war again. Nightly U.S. strikes, and Iran-aligned groups hitting back across the wider region. Section 3. The meeting that changed everything. Here's what reportedly happened behind closed doors, based on accounts multiple officials gave to CNN and Axios. On that Friday, President Trump sat down with his top political and military advisors to weigh something far bigger than the strikes already underway: a dramatically larger escalation, reportedly including hits on energy infrastructure, coastal radar, and air defense site, and even discussion of a possible move near Karg Island, one of Iran's most important oil export terminals. Picture what that would have actually meant: not a strike on a buried nuclear site, but an assault aimed at the economic lifeline of an entire nation, quite possibly with a ground component on Iranian soil for the first time in this conflict. That's not an escalation in the normal sense. That's a different war altogether. And in that room, 2 of the most powerful people in the room pushed back: Vice President J.D. Vance and General Caine, the top uniformed officer in the entire U.S. military. Section 4. The arithmetic behind the pause. General Caine didn't say the bigger operation was impossible. Sources say he told the room the U.S. could likely pull it off, but then laid out the cost, not just in dollars, but in interceptors. The Patriot missile stockpile that protects American troops, allied nations, and shipping lanes has been getting drained fast by Iran, by years of support to Ukraine, and by the ongoing fight against Houthi forces in Yemen, all competing for the same limited supply. This is the part almost nobody talks about. Wars aren't only decided by courage or political will. They're constrained by inventory. You can't fire a weapon you don't have. When the country's top military officer tells the sitting president, in effect, "We can win this fight, but we may not have enough interceptors left to defend ourselves afterward," that's not hesitation. That's arithmetic in uniform. UN Ambassador Mike Waltz went on national television afterward and, notably, didn't deny the stockpile problem. He acknowledged it directly, while also insisting the U.S. still has everything it needs to continue if the president chooses to. Both of those statements were delivered in the same breath. That contradiction is exactly the space this pause is living in. Section 5. 2 very different stories. Washington's framing. This pause exists to give diplomacy room to breathe, while keeping the threat of a bigger campaign visible enough to pressure Iran toward the table. Iran isn't telling the same story. Its foreign ministry held a televised press conference stating plainly there are no talks underway with the U.S. at all, and that Iran will never let another country determine the timing of war and peace on its behalf. It placed responsibility for the conflict squarely on Washington, and specifically called out European allies for what it called complicity. Both statements, Washington's and Tehran's, can technically be true at once. That overlap is precisely what makes this moment so unstable. A pause each side reads through a completely different lens isn't a foundation for peace. It's a shared silence, where both sides are quietly rearming and watching to see who blinks first. Section 6, where real diplomacy actually is. There's one place where something closer to real diplomacy is happening. Iranian and Omani officials meeting directly inside Tehran to discuss shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important energy choke points on the planet. Iran has framed these talks as strictly bilateral, unrelated to the US or the wider war. Markets are watching closely. Oil prices actually fell by more than 6% during the pause, settling near $90 a barrel. Not what you'd expect if traders thought this was fragile in the about-to-explode sense. It reads more like a temporary exhale than genuine confidence in peace. Section 7. The war nobody centering on Iran. The pause in direct US-Iran strikes hasn't calmed the wider region. Iran-backed Houthi forces struck a Saudi fuel refinery, the first direct attack on Saudi oil infrastructures in 4 years, and a Patriot battery operated by a Greek crew intercepted more drones aimed at another major Saudi export port. Iran has also accused Ukraine of a strike that killed a sailor on an Iranian vessel in the Caspian Sea, while Ukraine's president has said Russia passed satellite imagery of Gulf and American facilities to Tehran. Two separate wars, one in the Middle East, one in Eastern Europe, are now bleeding into each other through shared intelligence and overlapping alliances. Section 8. What happens next? Nobody, not analysts, not officials in Washington, not anyone in Tehran, can say with certainty which way this tips. If this pause was mainly about buying time to rebuild depleted stockpiles, it comes with an invisible expiration date. The bigger plan discussed in that White House meeting wasn't canceled. It was set aside, which is a very different thing from abandoned. Underneath it all sits the original trigger, Iran's nuclear program. Even the US's own assessments disagree on how much damage the strikes actually did. Some call it severe and irreversible. Others say it only delayed things by months. When a country's own agencies can't agree, nobody can honestly claim the threat is eliminated. And a country that just endured weeks of bombing has little incentive to let inspectors in to verify anything in the middle of an active war. Close. A pause in bombing has never once in history meant a war is over. What we're watching is a superpower that just quietly admitted it's running low on the tools to keep escalating, and a government in Tehran that just said, publicly, it won't be rushed into peace on anyone else's terms. Both sides are betting the other blinks first. Subscribe, because the next time the skies over Iran go loud again, or stay quiet for good, you'll want to already understand exactly why. Approximately 1,050 words, roughly 7 to 8 minutes at normal narration pace, grounded in CNN/Axios, reporting from late July 2026 on the U.S. strike pause, the Vance Caine objections, Patriot stockpile concerns, and regional spillover, written fresh in original wording.